Please let me say a few words about our next speaker. David Shackleton is a co-founder of OpenBack, the only mobile engagement platform with dynamic push notifications and device-side decisions. In 26, David also co-founded Ding, the largest international top-up platform, which delivers a top-up every second across more than 130 countries. So I think we can start. Let me introduce David Shackleton, OpenBack CEO and co-founder, and he will tell us about using push notifications to boost player retention for mobile games. So, David, you are welcome.
Thank you, Vlad. Much appreciated. I think first and foremost, David couldn't make it, so that's why I'll be giving the talk in his stead. So my name is Dylan Grace. I'm the head of gaming technology at OpenBack. And we do mobile engagement, and we're a mobile engagement platform that focuses on push notifications. So today what I'm going to be talking about is how to use push notifications to basically improve your retention and revenue with mobile gaming. And basically talk about how powerful push notifications actually are at the moment. So basically the key trends that we'll be covering are mobile engagement, data privacy, and then using edge computing to actually get the most out of push notifications. So a big thing with app performances is that app success is hard. Retention is a huge problem, and this is obviously a big thing for mobile games, that it is easier and more cost efficient to actually retain users than it is to acquire new users. So you can see that usage rate of an app, it severely drops after about 30 days. And obviously the more interesting your app is, the better you are at engaging with your users and actually keeping your players happy, the higher your retention is going to be. And the higher your retention, the higher your revenue, which obviously everybody wants. And basically, so now the push notification center is kind of the central hub of where you can communicate with your users, and especially with gaming users. If you are a casual game developer, or even maybe just a hyper casual, any form of casual game developer, or even just general kind of core to mid-level games, they are seeing that more and more users will not interact with email. And email obviously was previously the best way to interact with users, but is moving further and further and further towards push notifications. And one of the big things is that the more push notifications you send, more likely you're just going to end up annoying your users, and that's going to cause some churn, and that's going to cause users to uninstall your app. So the key is to actually send good notifications, send things that people actually care about, send something that will be of interest to them, and keep your players happy. And because that will keep your players happy, that will retain your users, and then that will obviously lead to more profit. So from here, we have a couple of things where we like to keep track of when any large company, or even sometimes entire countries, will send out ridiculous notifications. And because of how their push platform is actually set up, they basically can't fall back from those failures. So sending a message multiple times, you just end up spamming your users and annoying them. You can't, some news outlets, they send out a push notification, and then if there's something incorrect in that push notification, because of how they have it set up, they have to actually send out another one where they're correcting the previous issue that they had made. And there's loads of different examples of all this kind of stuff. And one of the big ones is ignorant of context, because context is a very important thing from what we see with, especially with games and with sending push notifications, is if you send a notification to a user and it has absolutely no relevance to them, all you're going to do is annoy them, and you're going to get them to uninstall, which obviously nobody wants. So that is why we try to move away from that, try to move away from the traditional push notification architecture, where you have to where you can end up sending multiple notifications to the same user, where you can't update a notification that you've sent out. It's a fire and forget. We've basically moved away from that with dynamic notifications. There's just more metrics about, notification fails, about how the second you annoy somebody with your notification, they'll switch off notifications and you've lost that user. You've essentially lost that user and you can no longer get through to them. So there's more stuff about how basically people only want relevant notifications at the right moment. So it's all about context and timing. Because obviously with traditional push notifications, everything is sent from the server side, and the server doesn't know that much information about you. All it knows about you, the actual player, the only thing it knows is the last bit of information that server was updated with. Which is basically just, it's old, it's an archaic, it's the old technology. It's what we need to move away from and actually rely on the phone, each user's actual phone, to decide when is the right moment for that user to get a notification. So one of the big things, and this is especially prevalent with push notifications, is people are more likely to engage with notifications when they're not busy. When they're sitting there, they're just checking their phone. They might be on the tube. They might be like doing some form of traveling, just sitting maybe in the bathroom, wherever you check your phone the most. And if you just send standard notifications of just, oh, deliver this to everybody when it is 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. or at a time, or based on completing a certain task, send that notification right now, you're going to see that a lot of users will just ignore your notification. They'll get the notification, but they won't see it. And then a few hours later, they'll come back to their phone. Then they'll see it, and they're not going to interact with it. They're much more likely to actually interact with the notification the second it appears. So that's why the actual moment of delivery and the context is super important, and that is something that we try to improve with dynamic push notifications. So instead of sending it something based on a time or when a user completes a task, more so wait till that user has just arrived at home, or wait till that user has just unlocked their phone. Especially just unlocking their phone is one of the best ones, because they've just unlocked their phone. You know that they're looking at it. That is a perfect moment to send that user a notification, because they're going to see it. So they are most likely going to interact with it. At least you'd hope. So there's some interesting metrics that they do really matter about knowing your user base, knowing who your players are, and when are they most likely going to interact with your game or interact with your app. And what's actually quite interesting is we had one of our gaming companies recently ran a test where they saw that the majority of their users, they basically sent out notifications to users that hadn't opened the app in X amount of days. So they had separated that out into 7 days. Someone hasn't opened the app in 7 days, 14 days, and 21 days. And obviously they saw that they got the best metrics from users that hadn't opened it in just the 7 days. And then in combination with that, they said, right, we'll send a notification to these users that haven't opened the app in 7 days. We'll send one in the morning, one in the evening, or one in the afternoon at like 12 p.m. on their local time, and then one in the evening. And what they saw is that by far the notifications in the evening actually perform the best. And that is just plain and simply because they know that they know that their user base, they're more likely to respond to notifications in the evening, because their workday is over, they're sitting down, they might have just finished their dinner, they're watching the TV or whatever it might be. And they were able to use those metrics to actually improve their notifications and improve their notifications, which then of course improved their retention and improved their actual app performance. So one of the big things, and this is primarily for iOS, but it is most likely going to be moving towards Android, as Android and iOS are slowly but surely moving towards the same level when it comes to push notifications. But one of the biggest things that you can do for making sure that users will actually enable push notifications for your iOS app is to pop up the permission box, the actual dialog box that says, "Hey, will you let us send you push notifications?" The first key step is to actually pop that up at the right time. If somebody installs your app and the first thing they see is like, "Hey, can we send you push notifications?" Absolutely not. You're going to have 60-70% maybe of users are going to say no, because you haven't given them a reason. You haven't given them a reason to want to actually get notifications from you. So that's why the first step for improving that and improving the percentage of users that will actually allow push notifications is to pick the right moment. So let them have a little look around your app. Let them do a few things. If you have an onboarding process, pick the right moment in that process to say, oh, now, okay, well, you've gotten through, you've gotten a little taste of what the app actually gives you. Here's, we just want to send you push notifications. And then the second thing is, now you've sent it at the right time. The second best thing is to make sure you actually explain, why do you want to send them notifications? If it just says, oh, yeah, can we send you notifications? People aren't really going to care. They're not going to understand. But if you explain to them, we want to send you notifications to keep you up to date with our latest offers, or uh, notify you of important changes to your account, or notify you of events that are going on, or anything, whatever your app is about, whatever your game is about. Um, that is a key factor. And if you can do both of those things well, of showing the dialog box at the right time and giving a good reason as to why you want to send these users push notifications, you'll see a much higher opt-in to push notifications. Um, which obviously, the more users you have that you can send notifications to, then that you've got a bigger user base that you can try and actually retain and keep them within your app and keep them playing your game. So some global insights that we've seen from just our own analytics, that emojis and personalization have strong impact on click-through percentages, and then of course that will have a strong impact on goal conversions of users actually completing tasks within your game. And then the other side is obviously retention. If somebody spends money on your game, they're most likely going to keep playing it because, well, they've spent money on it now. So now it's something of value to them. They don't want to just throw it away there and then. And personalization is one of the biggest things that you can do. Just simply even using a user's, maybe even their username, if you don't have any social media aspect to the app, but their first name, extremely powerful. Throwing that into a notification, instead of just saying, "Hey, random player," you just say, like, "Hey, Dylan." It makes the user feel a bit more unique. It makes them feel a bit more important, and that will bring users back to your app. And of course, personalization, based on their name, what part of the game are they in, something that seems very unique to them. Each layer of that you can add, the more the merrier, the better it is. And then, of course, sending that at the right time matters massively. One of the other interesting ones is that emojis. We've actually seen that emojis increase click-through rates by up to like 84%, but they will start to decline over time. So if you start sending notifications and then you start including emojis, you'll see the performance go up. But after a little bit of time, people will get used to them and kind of goes down again. But they are great for getting a nice little boost in people interacting with your notifications. So one of the big things that people obviously are concerned about in this day and age is privacy. And that is one of the big things of of getting consent off the user, making sure that their data is private, making sure that they can have their data deleted, and making sure that their data is stored somewhere safe, somewhere that that hackers can't get to it, that people can't, that it's not going to be compromised. So one of the big things, and especially for gaming in America, is COPPA, the child. I don't remember the acronym off the top of my head, but you can't notify, you can't send a notification, or you can't interact with somebody under the age of 13 unless it's been given parental or custodial consent. That's one of the big things, because obviously one of the biggest player bases for any game are users under the age of 16, under the age of 13. They are where that's where the majority of the users are. Obviously, it might be game dependent, but more often than not, that is the case. So if you can't contact those users and you can't get through to those users, then it's much harder to actually retain them, because they are left to their own decisions. They're left to their own journey within your app. You can't contact them and see that they've made it to this point in your app, and then maybe send them a notification saying, "Hey, you should try this, or you should do this, or here's something new about your account." So being able to properly navigate those kind of those consent laws and those consent restrictions is very important. So making sure that you can still being able to work around that and actually still contact your users, but obviously doing it in a safe and um, in a safe way, essentially. Um, Private user data, as always, should always be accessible by that user, and they should be able to do whatever they want with their own data. Very important, and it is important for push notifications because in the old way of doing it, to send a user a push notification, you require a big backend with a load of data, and it's got all this information about each individual user. But we can get to why that can change, and it can change very easily. Um, and then you've got the right to be forgotten and data storage control. That's kind of more so GDPR kind of stuff. Not really any need to get into that. Um, One of the other key things about the likes of COPPA and other data privacy laws is that push notification tokens are actually considered personal identifiable information. So large apps that have quite a large population of children on their app actually can't store the push notification. They can't store the push token um, because it is qualified as identifiable information. So how do you actually notify users if you can't use push notifications? How do you actually send a notification to a user if you can't send them um, if you don't have a push token? And that's obviously where local notifications come in and all that kind of stuff. But you have to kind of prepare. Local notifications need to be prepared well in advance, and you need to know that this is what we're going to want to do when the user gets to this part of the game, and we're going to need to know that this is what we want to say to them, and that can't change until the next time we push out an app or push out an update. So that's one of the big kind of barriers to using push notifications with gaming is the fact that at least in the US you can't actually take the push notification token. So here's kind of like a diagram of the data journey of how usual third-party vendors will work with sending notifications of like the mobile app will connect to their backend and the dashboard UI, and it will send them data, and it will go back to their it will then connect to their APIs, which will connect to their backend, and then all that data then is stored all in the backend, and you have to worry about each step of that process about where that data is going and where that is coming from. Especially if your game is worldwide, it's in a load of different countries. Each one will have their different restrictions, and each one will have their different laws. So why edge computing is the future is how it fixes all of these things and how it basically removes any of these issues, because push notifications currently are quite broken. People are abusing them, and people are just doing a really bad job. They are spamming users, they are sending them complete nonsense at the wrong time that nobody cares about, which is why I'd say the majority of people that will be watching this, they will download an app, they will block notifications, don't care, don't want to hear. And it's because there's so many people just doing a bad job. So what you could basically use to do a better job with that is what we have is basically a combination of local notifications and remote notifications. So a local notification obviously is scheduled by the app, sets a future time to deliver, very hard to update if it's no longer relevant. It's not helpful for live ops. They're they are they're useful for a very specific use case, and they will get through, but they are not they're rigid. They're very static. You can't really change them that easily. Push notifications then on the other side are more dynamic, but they require a lot more backend integration, and they require like a database. They require all this information about individual users, and you also require a connection to that user. That user needs to have an internet connection. They need to have a lot of battery to be able to receive the push notification. They need to they need to be in constant contact with your server, and it's a lot more going on. But what you can do is you can actually just combine the two. So this is talking about this is kind of another thing about talking about push notifications are broken. It talks about what showing you that email. You can now have automated user segments. It's rich and personalized content. The delivery is close to 100%. You can track opens, you can track clicks, you can track unsubscribes. Whereas with push notifications, they were released 10 years ago and have basically not improved. You can automate them and you can make them a little bit more personalized, but it's harder to do that. The delivery is erratic. You don't actually know if a push notification actually got delivered unless you're using a third-party vendor. They'll tell you that they sent 10,000 push notifications, but they won't actually tell you, well, you know what, only 2,000 of those actually got delivered, and only 2,000 users actually saw the notification. And then from that, they can only sometimes tell you whether or not somebody actually clicked the notification or what did they do because of that notification. As another big thing about delivery rates declining, basically, if you're so the longer your app goes without being opened, the less likely you're going to be able to send a push notification to that user. And that's just plain and simply because of how the OS works and how the OS works with either Firebase or APNS. That the longer an app goes unopened, the less resources it's given by the OS. And then that just plain and simply means that your chances of getting through to that user is much more unlikely. Whereas if your notifications are actually on the device, they're actually on the user's device and not relying on a server to send them, you have a much higher chance of getting through to that user and bringing them back and retaining them and actually winning back that user. So here's basically a diagram of how a traditional third-party vendor will work. So it's basically about how the mobile app will have to send a push token to the backend. That backend then will send a notification to Firebase or APNS, which will then go back to the app. But that kind of issue of sending through to Firebase and APNS is unreliable. The push token that is sent to the server is also a little bit unreliable because that push token changes whenever. It might change when you turn off your phone and turn it back on. It might change if you uninstall the app and reinstall the app. If you update the app, there's a lot of different scenarios where that push token will actually change. So what we thought of is basically how to actually fix that is to try and remove the Firebase and APNS aspect of it and move basically all of this processing power and all of this information all to the device. So basically using the SDK, we can store all of the push notifications on the device without actually having to rely on a server. So to explain that better, it's basically instead of having a server send a push notification to your phone, what the server actually sends is it sends the content, the settings, the regulations, anything that needs to be sent to the device, and then it's stored on the device. So instead of having all this data stored on the server, it's actually stored on the device, and the device then says, well, now it's time to deliver this notification to this user with this content. So it's instead of storing a notification, it's actually just storing the content of a notification and the settings of a notification. So the general advantages of mobile edge computing is that you get real-time data processing and analysis, reduce cloud costs because you don't have to store all this information in a server. If you're using the user's device and you're just sending them a notification that is saying it would be saying something like, "Hey, username, come back and use our app." In a traditional manner, you would need a backend server that is saying, okay, so here is Dylan's phone. We're going to send Dylan a notification that specifically says, hey, Dylan. Whereas with the edge computing side, you're actually sending out a small file that says, pop up a notification that says, hey, grab the user's name from their phone. Here's a notification that's delivered at some specified time by your phone. And that goes to every user. So you actually you don't care who the user is. You don't care. You don't need to have any information sent between them and your backend. The phone is doing all the heavy lifting, and the phone is doing it at a better time because it doesn't need to rely on some sort of update from a server. It's just the phone is going to say it. The phone will be driving all of the decisions. And then, of course, because you're storing all the data on the user's phone and you don't actually have to store it in the server, and you don't need any of that information, it's giving you massive data privacy advantages where you can actually, control these moments and control the moments of delivery and all the content, all the personalization that's all controlled by the phone, so you don't actually have to worry about data privacy or COPPA or GDPR or anything like that. So it's basically talking about, the future of app messaging, of how we started off back in 2006 with app analytics, and then we got push notifications came from that, which is just blasting users with push from the server side, um, using basically outdated useless information to send push notifications to people, to the wrong people sometimes with the wrong content at the wrong moment. We're now moving forward to actually on the edge, on the device, using the phone itself to deliver the notifications to the right people at the right time, and with even less effort, because you don't have to set up APIs, you don't have to set up any backend information, you don't need to store random information about users. It's just all on the phone. Just take it from the phone. That's where it is already. So there's no need for doing any of the extra work. This is just another quick slide talking about the difference between conventional push and dynamic push, about how user segments are set up. Conventional, they're set up with on a server with certain filters, whereas dynamic, it's actually updated live on the device. If that user moves in or out of a certain segment, then the device will change that, and they're not going to get a notification that they shouldn't be getting. One of the big things is that because all the information is on the device, and all the actual decision making is made by the device, is that you can actually update or remove notifications. So you can say that if you send a notification to a user and after 2 hours they haven't clicked it or they haven't interacted with it, well, then just take it away, because you don't want that user coming back to their phone and seeing 5, 6 notifications all from your app, because they're immediately going to just block notifications. They're going to turn them all off. So that's why you can actually say deliver this notification, and then realize, okay, well, they weren't really interested in that one, so we'll just take it away. Or even if just even more simply, of if you send out a notification that actually has some incorrect information in it, or use maybe a misspelling or something like that, after that notification is delivered, if the user hasn't interacted with it, then you can actually just update the notification on the fly, because it is technically living on their device as a local notification. It's basically, in a technical sense, they are local notifications that are remotely controlled. Um, and then, of course, you've got massive improvements on delivery, because you don't need to rely on an internet connection. Users can receive notifications even when they've got airplane mode turned on. They've got no connection. Everything is already on their phone. All the reasons, all the settings for the notification is already there, so they don't need any connection to your server, any database, or anything like that. Um, and that's the big thing, is that whatever they do with that notification, whether they click it, they might swipe it away, they might click it. If they clicked it, did they go into your app and then perform some sort of action? All of that can be tracked, because it's all stored within the device. And then the next time that user gets some form of internet connection, then they send all that data back, and we find out, okay, so this many people clicked the notification. From that, this many people actually went in and made a purchase on the store, or finished a level, or whatever it might be. So because we're using the device and using everything on the edge, it gives us full metrics, full attribution. We can actually really understand, well, this user did this because they clicked a notification. It's there. It takes out the guesswork. It was like, well, we think they did this because they got a notification. It allows us to say black and white, they clicked a notification, then did this. So it's direct attribution. So this is just a kind of an example of conventional push versus the OpenBack push, of how you don't actually need APNS and FCM, because all of our notifications, all the information is it's stored on a server, and then you can use APNS or FCM to blast it out to that user, and then all those settings and all the settings and information is then stored on the device. Or if you don't want to use APNS, or you can't use APNS or FCM, well, then you just use the SDK that's on the device to pull down the information from our server, and then that's stored there, and then you don't need to worry. Um, and then, of course, you can choose whether or not you want to send data to or from the device. Obviously, it depends on whatever data regulations you abide to. And this is kind of this more stats that we actually have about delivery reliability, about how basically the improvement from standard push notifications to actual on-device push notifications, and talking about all the different brands, and the improvement that we saw from the actual delivery rate of just sending notifications through our system and then sending notifications through just Firebase. So these are all some of the biggest Android brands, and this is literally that, like, say, for example, Motorola, we saw that 4% of phones for Motorola that we were testing actually got a notification when we just sent it through Firebase, just through the conventional push method. And then when we actually used our SDK and used our setup, we got 64%, which is obviously a massive increase. Because this is one of the big things that we see people complaining about, is that when we talk to the devs and we talk to any of the people on the marketing teams or whoever is actually sending out notifications or testing notifications, one of the first things they say to us is that we set up notifications, we just set up Firebase, we set up APNS, and we sent the notification to everybody in the office, and like 5 people got it out of 20. And they're like, why? And the only answer to that is that nobody knows. There's a ridiculous amount of different reasons as to why each individual phone might not get a notification. And this is why the guaranteed delivery and the superior delivery of having the notifications actually stored on the phone and actually all done using the device is extremely important. So this is kind of a thing about talking about player funnel conversion and how you can track users. How you can actually track users from the second that they actually install your app and turn on push notifications, and how you can track sending them a notification the whole way down to completing a goal. So this is basically the entire process of what using device side delivery can actually give you, because you can see that you have X amount of users that are within the audience. You know that many users will actually receive the notification. From that, then if you send a notification, you can track how many users actually opted out of notifications because you sent them one, and likewise how many people actually uninstalled your app because you sent them a certain notification. Because that's a big thing of we have seen that users will send we will have people send a push notification to their players, and they'll see their uninstalls just skyrocket or their installs plummet, whichever way you want to look at it. And it's all a learning process. You create your push notifications based on the metrics that you have, and then you also gain metrics from sending push notifications. So it's kind of a cycle of learning of like, well, because of these metrics, we need to improve our notifications this way. And well, because of these notifications, we'll see our metrics improve. So it all works hand in hand. And then this just tracks the whole way down to a user actually clicking your app or clicking the notification, opening your app, and then going in and actually completing a goal. And then this is just talking more about conventional server-side push versus the edge computing, about everything that you can do. There's all the different types of signals and triggers that we use in segments and everything. So, send a message to a user when their phone is unlocked, based on their local device time. Are their headphones plugged in? Are they roaming? Are they not roaming? What signal strength do they have? Are they connected to a certain Wi-Fi? Whatever. There's loads and loads and loads and loads of different options and setups. So this is just talking more about the performance between standard push notifications and dynamic push notifications. We do actually see at least a four times increase in click-through. And that's just plain and simply because your standard push notifications are going to be when this user completes an action, send them a notification. They're probably already still in your app. They're not going to click the notification. Or if it's a thing of, at this time of the day, we want to send out, there's an event going on. Send every user a notification right now. That is just, it's a ridiculous way of doing it, because you might have some users where it's 9 a.m. You'll have other users where it's 9 p.m. and some users where it could be like 2 in the morning. And you're sending a notification to everybody at that time saying, hey, we've got an event going on. Whereas if you wait for a time where first thing in the morning when a user actually unlocks their phone, send them a notification then. Or first thing in the evening when somebody unlocks their phone, or when they get home, or when they're not in work. It's using proper individual context will massively increase people actually allowing notifications, people actually interacting with notifications, and then because they're consistently engaged and consistently interacting with your app, higher retention. And this is just the thing about battery usage, which can drive uninstalls. So because we've actually had a university here in Ireland did testing on our SDK versus conventional push and another third-party push provider to test the battery performance of Android phones while running our software, third party, and just nothing. And basically, because everything is on the phone and everything is done device side, we don't need to make radio calls, which is one of the biggest battery burners within a phone, obviously, other than the screen. So because we're actually not using constant radio calls and Wi-Fi calls, we don't use as much battery, and because we don't use as much battery, we don't annoy as many users. So it's something that's completely behind the scenes, and most users wouldn't actually kind of notice. But if somebody installs your app and sees their battery starts to absolutely plummet, then they're going to cop on and they're going to figure out that this is the app that's doing it. They're going to uninstall, which obviously nobody wants. And one of the big things is that we are seeing. Obviously, apps will send you a notification where there's an action within the notification of here's an offer. Would you like to use the offer? Here's an offer code. Would you like to use the offer? All this kind of stuff. We're seeing some apps actually move towards gameplay within the notifications of a lot of location-based apps, like say not necessarily Pokemon Go, but something of the similar of a similar style of when you go past a certain area, it will pop up with a notification saying, "Hey, you've just passed like an enemy area or something like that. Would you care? Would you like to fight now?" And then you have the option there. So we're seeing a lot of gaming companies move the actual gameplay from not just within the game, but to the lock screen as well. Where obviously, if you don't have push notifications set up, or you're not doing a good job with that, that kind of isn't really an option. Unless you're doing it correct. So this is basically one of the big things that we do is that we like to help people. We like to learn from especially gaming companies, because they are always interested in using push notifications and using basically doing the most with what information that they're given to send users notifications and everything. So what we actually do love doing is helping people. And if somebody comes to us and says, "Well, what are we doing wrong, or what should we do? We're doing nothing. What can we do?" Is just kind of a short list of things that we just believe will help from a very basic level of using local notifications. You need sending a notification is actually almost as important as canceling a notification, because obviously you want somebody to be informed, but you don't want to over-inform. So canceling a notification that a user shouldn't actually get is almost as important. Clearing badge counts, make sure that there's not little notifications everywhere, because obviously a lot of users are they like to do some house cleaning. They like to keep their icons clean, keep their top bars clean. It's always very important to make sure that your clear badge counts whenever somebody actually interacts with a notification. And then some more of the bigger things is keeping the app running in the background, staying current. Having dashboards for live ops is detrimental to improving and to knowing what you're doing right and knowing what you're doing wrong. Because as I was saying earlier on, the metrics drive notifications, the notifications drive metrics. If you send out a good notification and you see a lot of improvement, well, then you need to learn from that and see, what did you do right? Did you send it at a really good time? Did you have some really good content? A lot of the time is you just offered somebody something for free. So obviously loads of people are going to click that. But you need to learn. It's extremely important to learn from what you're doing right with notifications and also what you're doing wrong. So tracking when people uninstall after you send a message, or if they block notifications after you send a message, is also a key thing to keeping an eye on. Personalization, obviously, as I was saying earlier on, personalization of content is huge. Make that user feel unique. Make that player feel like you actually are. There's somebody on the other side that said, "Okay, he's gotten to this stage, so I will send him a notification." Make them feel like they are important. Is a massive point for just improving your notifications. And then orchestrating signal triggers for the best moment is extremely key. Context the moment of delivery, all extremely important to deliver to the right user at the right time, and especially with the right content. If you can get all three of those things right, well, then you're doing great. Um, and it's just kind of more stuff about mobile edge computing, transforming mobile marketing, making sure it's reliable, engaging, compliant. As I said, data compliancy, huge issue. You don't want to be getting fines from for COPA violations or for GDPR violations. Nobody wants to be getting those. So making sure that you are compliant while also making the most of being able to send reliable notifications that actually do engage your users and help you retain users. It's all very important. But that is basically everything. Thank you all for listening. If you have any questions, that would be great.
Yep, we have the question from the audience for now. So, do the dynamic push notifications work on the other Android stores except Google Play, or does not it depend from the platform? For example, Huawei App Store, Amazon App Store, etc.
Yeah. So it does. We don't. Yeah, we don't need to. As long as you can put the SDK into your app, we don't care what store it's on. We don't. It doesn't make a difference. Because Huawei especially is a big one that obviously a lot of people have issues with, but we don't.
All right. Great, Dylan. Thanks. Thank you again very much.